For a brief period this morning, I went around to the headlines. The news vines and the alternative and mainstream half-truths and deceptions and rewinds. The refried beans and warmed over hash that is the result of forces bringing in the trash instead of taking it out. People and objects, ideas and fantasies in the process of being taken out. There's lots of confusion, delusion and unnecessary gunplay and saber rustling, and the usual lies about who won an election or came out on top at the convention as the dark goblins preying on us make the decision about who's going to lead us into perdition or onto the conveyor belt, where those of us still terminally asleep can be packed into cans for the sustenance of Cannibal Nation, shortly to appear in the windshield instead of the rearview mirror, depending on what direction you're driving in. What I can say is that the intensity has definitely ratcheted up from what I was noticing since the last time I was noticing anything except the news inside my head. Extra, extra, read all about it. Madness and slouching beasts are afoot, and they are approaching the cities and citadels of our former copacetics. We are not copacetic now from what I can tell, as it all gets shot to hell by senators and presidents and the usual arseholes in residence, all under the financial heel of the Nosferatu Ashkenazis, who seem to have no problem managing Cabin Boy Nation on its pillow-biting journey of unfortunate self-discovery. They can steal your fortunes, your futures, your progeny, and morph out your attention while still running the world's drug industries, the sex slave trade, the organ harvesting, and the warmongering as they hyperdrive into the twisted and tormenting defense of the lands they stole from the people they are genociding, while continuing pell-mell in operating their fabrication nation as the sovereign crime country for which purpose it was created. Like it ever had anything to do with God or religion in the first place, unless your God is the devil and your religion is blood-stained currency sailing like a hovercraft kind of black magic prayer rugs. Listen up, people. Yeah, I know you're watching Fox News and singing the blues about all those missing cheeseburgers and knee knockers you haven't gotten around to yet and can't stop thinking about because, except for all the other useless shit you're chasing after, there isn't anything else that you do think about or rub your crotch in disrespect of. No, you won't be listening to me, but you'd better do something about these flesh-eating psychopaths before you see your name up there in lights on the menu as the Daily Special. If you wonder where your children are, they're in the appetizer section, unless they're on the dessert menu, if the age is right and they're cute enough. If you don't think this is a living, breathing reality, you truly are a fool who's going to be made wise by persisting in their folly. When you get an apple stuffed into your mouth and see yourself brought in on a trolley, on your way to that moment, you did all the right things to get yourself transformed into what usually shows up that way. What do you know? It does taste like pork, and you thought they didn't eat that. Well, I hate to be the one to tell you, but right. I keep forgetting. You're not listening to me. So be it. Onward it marches, the destinies of fools and gods, the destinies of the dependent and independent, the destinies of the bound and free, as well as the destinies of the binders and the liberators. One of them is in short supply, but that's the way it is in times of darkness. There are times of darkness and creatures of darkness. There are invisible creatures of darkness and visible creatures of darkness, and the latter are your leaders and the ones who manipulate them, and that all goes back to the source of darkness, and that is located in the human heart and mind. At least the doorway in is located there. Seal the door where evil dwells. One might well ask how it is that the darkness and the confusion of the times can be so proliferative, pervasive, and ubiquitous. How did it get all over the place so quickly? Well, there are vibrational regularities to periods of time. The car and the telephone and probably a whole lot of other things were all being invented at the same time. We may only know the single name that got picked out to be thought responsible for them, but if you look a little deeper into the history of these moments, you find that similar things were happening all over the place. A certain degree of collective depravity, cruelty, and relative indifference to human suffering was very present in ancient Rome. Certain personality types kept showing up. Everybody had to deal with it or they left town. Some would say that Rome fell because it became overextended like modern-day America, and some will tell you that it was the lead they lined the aqueducts and delivery systems with that brought about the insanity and all those big houses without children, and the kind of things you find out if you read latter-day philosophers of the time. Everybody has an answer or a theory, just like they do now. When a culture is in free fall like America and other parts of the West, it is always a combination of a few simple things, and the negative expression of these things shows up in every related environment, which is why all over America, law enforcement is out of control. The darkness comes down or up from a certain location and presents itself into the minds of those most disposed to its whims and pleasures. The people thought to be in high places that inhabit the low places, and who then, through the illusion of power and prominence, influence so many lesser minds, who then act out upon their fellows. It's all part of the movie. In times of darkness, certain kinds of shit happens. It happens in order to show the deceived, deluded, and all the rest what happens when we give up our own sovereignty out of fear and appetite. This kind of thing operates like an epidemic and isn't too long after that when real epidemics follow. The biggest problem in times of darkness is believing that darkness is everywhere and 10 times too powerful to compute or arrest. Actually, the darkness has no literal or real being except what is given to it by the one considering or contemplating it. If the darkness is collecting on the outside, then it can be assumed with authority that the light is concentrating on the inside in various places, and quite possibly outside as well, but it's not reported on because the darkness, which controls the avenues of public information, doesn't want these things to be known. If the darkness is going to go down, then it damn well intends on taking the rest of us with it, and that is why it looks that way. You can hear the drums and the hoofbeats pounding on the earth as shake, rattle, and awe approach. You can hear the thunder of imaginary darkness taking the final footsteps to convince you that all is lost and you have to crawl into the hole that it is in. That's why one of the biggest liars and manipulators of present history wants you to go see wars, wants you to believe that slavery happened differently than it did, and that the people who did it are actually the heroes that ended it, that certain people behaved differently than they did, and that history happened different than it did, and that certain things happened that never happened, and that there are now more survivors, far more than there was when they first started counting. Any fool can check the world census and find out what could or could not be so. Who suffers the most from a lie? It would be the one who believes it. The one telling it is already suffering from something else. How useful can any lie be if it compromises your sightline and blinds you to what is before you? How efficient and helpful can any lie be unless you are the one telling it? There's no future for those who believe in lies. At least the liar can make off with a certain amount of profit one way or another, for however long that lasts, until they have to return as the present victim of their former actions, or far worse, depending on the scale of injuries delivered. These miscreants have no clue as to the further regions to which they are bound. Pay careful attention. It is on your doorstep. You can go a lot of ways from here. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then you had better have dependable and righteous heroes. Otherwise, you can take this post and roll it up and stick it up your ass and set it on fire. Save yourselves the trouble of having your entire ass and everything connected to it set on fire further down the road. We shall see.